August 19, 2018. Healing All of Me. Neil Worthington, licensed Unity teacher and spiritual leader at Unity of Payson, Arizona.
I am so grateful for this community and for this place. So today I've chosen the topic, healing all of me. And by that I don't necessarily mean every part of me physically, but I mean all of me, the great me that I am. We're using our theme for August, I am healthy, but we're expanding a little bit beyond just in our body as we spoke when we talked about the theme, to mean much more than that, wholeness in the grander sense. So reflect with me just for a moment what we considered 2 weeks ago. The meaning of whole is entire, whole, but things also like unhurt, uninjured, safe, healthy, sound, genuine, and straightforward. That is the wholeness we seek. Charles Fillmore, our founder, had this to say about wholeness. The one who uses the word really implies that he has an understanding of the law of perfect harmony of being. Health is the normal condition, or I would say wholeness as well, is the normal condition of man and of all creation. We find that there is an omnipresent principle of health pervading all living things. Health, real health, is from within. Does not have to be manufactured in the without. Health is the very essence of being. It is universal and enduring, as is God. Charles Fillmore. So today I'd like to consider three faces, or I might add a T to it and say three facets of wholeness. Simply, self-acceptance, consciousness, and belief. We'll say much more. I will back up. I will say a little bit. Self-acceptance. I consider to be honest self-appraisal without judgment, and it opens the door to wholeness. Consciousness, a peculiar word that we use a lot and maybe don't understand too well. As we take responsibility for our consciousness, we work on the only effective level for healing. And belief. When we build belief in the wholeness that we are, we pave the way to experiencing that wholeness completely. Before we consider each one of those things, let me say a word. When we hope or pray for healing, we may have a propensity to protect ourselves, because there's a lot of sensitive stuff around healing. And it hurts sometimes. There may be hurts and injuries of the past that stay with us still and get triggered from time to time, and it just hurts, and we don't want to face those directly. We don't want to feel that hurt. But sometimes it may be only 10 minutes of pain that we must go through, but we must go through it. Wholeness is also a threat to the ego. As we engage our true self, we get pushback from that substitute self that loves attention, negative or positive, doesn't matter, loves that attention, that ego self. And we also protect ourselves because of self-image. We have an insufficiency in self-image. we're either tempted to recline and hide and go sit in a corner, saying I am nothing, or we try to build that self-image. We try to put it out there. But it tends to keep us from wholeness, that process. Now, let's take a look, if we can, yes, at one of those three faces of wholeness. You'll probably recognize that scripture that says, you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free. Remember that one? I see some nodding heads. That comes from John, the 8th chapter. And the truth of us is unique to each of us. In order to get at that truth, we may need to examine our values, decide what are our true values, and then we may need to look at our actions as well to find out, are they in harmony with those values? Are we in integrity with ourselves? At whatever point we are, we also discover the need to withhold judgment of ourselves. So easy for us to shoot on ourselves. I was shared this particular example of that, the idea of withholding judgment on ourselves. It's from The Circle of Atonement by Paul Ferrini. And he writes there, there is a beautiful quote written by one of Rajneesh, also Osho, known as Osho, one of Osho's disciples. And here it is. A citizen does not escape. And if he does not beat himself up for that. And if he beats himself up, he does not feel guilty about that. And if he does, he accepts that he does so. And if he can't accept that, he accepts that he doesn't accept it. Ferrini goes on to say, it doesn't matter how long it takes us to catch hold of the thread of self-acceptance, so long as we embrace it somewhere. With all of the judgment tapes we are constantly running in our mind, catching hold of the single thought that brings us peace is not easy, but it is essential to our spiritual practice. We can't love others without feeling, loving, and accepting ourselves. And I think that's the key here with regard to acknowledgement and self-acceptance. Feeling, loving, and accepting ourselves. One face of healing. Responsibility consciousness. You notice I've added a word to the consciousness or to the self-acceptance, and this one's responsibility. There's a scripture that you're also probably familiar with. As a man, this is the old King James Version, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. We know from the unity studies the law of mind action. Anybody remember that law which says thoughts held in mind reproduce after their kind. As a man is, interesting, in his heart, not out here in the world, but within, where the real self, the self with the capital S is, there. As we think there, so we are. James Allen wrote a small book, doesn't even have a date of publication in it, As a Man Thinketh. And here's what he says in that book, real briefly. A man literally is what he thinks, his character being the complete sum of all his thoughts. So I spoke about this word consciousness, and I'd like you to help me with it for just a minute. It's a funny term, and I'd like you to just think for a minute and see if you can come up with a definition, 10 words or less, maybe even 6 words or less if you can. What is consciousness?
What you believe.
What you believe.
Awareness.
Awareness.
What is?
What is? Somebody else. Couple more.
Essence.
What was that?
Essence.
Yes, essence. You're getting it very succinct. It is all of those things. But I'd like to put it this way. Work with me from this perspective. I'm going to define it as the thoughts, feelings, and beliefs that constitute the interior of any person. The thoughts, feelings, and beliefs that are yours on the interior. It's so easy for us to work in the outside world, so difficult for us to go in within and to stay within. So the thoughts, feelings, which may be different than the outside ones, and beliefs on the interior level is what we're going to call consciousness. Now, the consciousness that is more on the outside is also a consciousness. It is thoughts, feelings, and beliefs. But it may be termed, could be collective consciousness, could be race consciousness, could be mass consciousness, could be consciousness of disease, could be consciousness of lack. So we put that in opposition. I don't want to be too dualistic, but put that in opposition to Christ consciousness. You've heard that spoken around unity. Christ consciousness. The very divine within us expressed is Christ consciousness. We are, in fact, as we've said a number of times, an expression of the divine. Each one of us is an expression of the divine. So as we look to that divinity, as we live that divinity, as we dwell in that divinity within us, we experience and express Christ consciousness. So what is the current nature of our consciousness? A couple questions I would ask myself. Is there a gap between my current consciousness and the Christ consciousness that I've caught in a glimpse of, but maybe not experienced fully? How can I raise my consciousness? You've heard that phrase over and over again, raising consciousness. And how can we be the best Christ we can be? Yes, Jesus the Christ was our master teacher. But he said, the things you do, or that I do, you'll do greater things than these. We are not separate in terms of the capability, in terms of the way we were created, than Jesus the Christ. We also have that opportunity to experience and express Christ consciousness. And we need to take responsibility for that. It is a huge responsibility, but with great reward. And then, by the way, all of these things are just something for you to start to chew on. They all have a lot of depth beyond what we'll discuss this morning. I've coupled intention with belief. And of course, we're still thinking about wholeness here. I kind of don't like the wording, so I've changed it as something that really resonates with me. But remember the story of the man who would like to have his son healed, and he came to Jesus, and Jesus asked him, do you believe? And he said, Lord, I believe. Help my unbelief. Well, since I don't think of a God that's separate, but within, where that consciousness, that inner consciousness lies, I have a problem with that. So I've termed it this way. I've kind of retranslated it, if you will, and it's probably not accurate according to the Greek, but It is according to what resonates as the very truth of me. I do believe, and I intend fullness of belief. I do believe, and I intend fullness of belief. First of all, we need to think, do I have an intention at all? If I'm thinking about expressing the divine consciously, do I have an intention about what I want to do? If I'm thinking about my wholeness, do I have an intention about that? Do I want to walk freely? Do I want to be whole in terms of my relationships? Do I want to be whole as it refers to lack and money in my life? Do I have an intention? So I would encourage you to set a firm intention. A great way to do that is to write in a diary. Perhaps read it again. Put it up on the refrigerator. Set an intention. Then see it clearly. Y'all like to dream? Oh, well, there's my Georgia coming out. I like to dream. I like to, I get up in the morning. 5 o'clock is the usual wake-up time for me. And the very first thing I do is I go and sit in the recliner and I dream. I just dream. And I visualize things that I want to have happen, things that I desire to spring forth in my life. I dream them. I imagine them. And the strange thing is, the more vividly I imagine them, the sooner they show up in my life. So I encourage you to visualize, dream daily, I would say. And then here's the one where I'm okay on the dreaming. I'm making some progress there. But here's the one that's really tough for me. Holding my focus. Holding my focus. I have to tell you a story about holding focus. There was a young boy born in 1854 on an Indian reservation outside of St. Cloud, Minnesota. It's kind of a wild place out there. He lived in a log cabin. Winter nights were maybe 40 below, and you had to stay close to the fireplace, and you had to have a lot of wood in store in order to stay warm. It was, being on a reservation, there were a number of neighbors, Native Americans that passed by, some of them with good intent, sometimes not with good intent. And one time when this young child was 2 years old, a Sioux medicine man strode into the cabin, snatched him from his mother's arms, and took him away for the day. Returned him at the end of the day. And this man recalls later that it was probably some sort of a mystical ceremony that he was a part of. He didn't know. But it was this kind of life that he grew up in. Rough and tumble, but then he went on to make many friends in the Native American community, and he was in and out of teepees and lodges all the time. That was his childhood. He attended school, but not for terribly long. He didn't become highly educated in the usual sense, but he had a teacher that fed that thirst for knowledge and understanding, which served him well later on. When he was 12 years old, he was, of course, it's Minnesota, and there's a lot of ice in Minnesota over the lakes and the ponds. He was skating. A great time that must have been, but he had a skating accident. He dislocated his hip, and he was treated for that, and it got worse and worse and worse. And he said in these words, "I was bled, leeched, cupped, lanced, seasoned, blustered, and rowelled." All that treatment. And it didn't do any good. His hip froze, and his leg stopped growing. So as he grew to maturity, one leg was 4 inches longer than the other leg. So he had a withered leg and was dependent at some point on braces and a crutch and a cane just to get around. Didn't quench his spirit. He still was vital and moved around the country and continued his quest and search for knowledge. he was married, and his wife was also a spiritual seeker. And at one point, she came to believe in an extraordinary turn of events that she did not inherit illness. And because she did not inherit illness, wholeness was her natural state. Well, this man noted that the tuberculosis that plagued her was gone after 2 years. Her death sentence commuted, and she lived for 40 years more. And so he took this to heart and began the work of prayer for wholeness for his withered leg. His withered leg, the one that was for. And after a few years, as he continued this focus, he held this focus, the braces went away. He no longer needed a cane. And near the end of his life, his leg was only 1 inch shorter than the other leg. A wholeness that would seem to be impossible. But he did hold that focus. Yet he also believed that he didn't have to die, which didn't quite happen, because he did. And of course, this man was who?
Charles
Darwin. So the challenge for me is holding my focus. I have a similar kind of thing that's physical. This finger, I once was cutting with a utility knife, an old one that wasn't put together very well. The blade come out and sliced my finger, and it severed the nerve in the tip of my finger. So I had no feeling. And I began to pray for healing of that. And I did that for some time. We're back at my calm and at ease. I probably need that.
Yeah. Yeah, where's your little clicker?
So what am I doing? Oh, I'm the one that's doing it. Putting it down. Can I tell you when I want to move the slide, please?
Yes.
So I prayed. I prayed and I affirmed the wholeness of my finger. After a year or so, I did this quite some time. After a year or so, I began to notice that I seemed to have some more feeling. Just a sense that it wasn't quite, I wasn't dropping things quite as much. And it got a little better. And then guess what? I lost track of it. I just let it go. So, until I start that again today, I would never know how long that healing, that wholeness would have taken. So, intention and belief include setting that intention, seeing it clearly, and holding the focus. Give me the next one. So I suspect if you're like me, that yes, you want to be whole in all ways, but you have a holdout. There's something in which you are not whole, in which you have lack, in which you are ill, in which you have some sense of disease or unease that you're just comfortable with. And you kind of like to hold out on that. Maybe you're getting a certain kind of attention for that. And you like the attention. But would you be whole? Will you be whole? What do we need to do that? Here's just some practical steps to go forward to wholeness. Walk through fear. Remember how we talked about some things are kind of fearful? You don't want to experience that pain. You may need to walk through that fear before you can get to the wholeness. Fear. Love is letting go of fear. Letting go of fear sometimes means that You need to experience that in all its intensity for a short period of time as the way through. You may need help with that too. You may need a professional of some sort. You may need a friend that can hear you and be with you. I urge you to find for you the way to walk through that fear to wholeness. We talked about consciousness. Develop the consciousness of wholeness. You know some of the ways, we use them all the time. Prayer. Meditation. This is within work. Do that within work. Prayer, meditation. What do you spend time on in terms of reading or input that you get? If you spend time with an input that feeds your soul, that affirms that consciousness of the divine within you, you're going to raise and lift that consciousness. You're going to develop it. And then build your belief one block at a time. If you say, oh, I can't believe that that could happen, whatever it may be, but can you believe that that next step can happen? Can you believe that that little improvement can happen? Put a building block there, and then look for the next one. Don't think that you have to get it all in an instant, because you may not. But you can build it. You can faithfully build it. And that, as well as developing consciousness and walking through fear to your wholeness, will bring you to wholeness. Now I'll give you the last one. So in Unity, we do affirmations. Affirmations are important, and I want to give you a very simple one. And I'd like to take, if you have something to write it down with, or memorize it, it's not very long. Take that with you, or take a picture of it. Yes, you turned your sound off on your phone, but take a picture of this. And you can even walk up here and take a picture of it if you want to. I am whole, holy, healthy. I am well. I am whole, holy, healthy. I am well. I'd like us to start it by saying it together. I am whole, holy, healthy. I am well. That's pretty good, but I think you can do it a little bit. Or is it one more time? Do you really mean this? Are you intent on moving toward wholeness? Together. I am whole, holy,